What's going on, guys? So this is going to be the weekly scan from June 10th to June 15th. So we do have CPI this week on Wednesday, and then we have initial jobless claims on Thursday. So typically with days like that, low volatility can kind of come before those data sets come out. So what I would probably be looking for is to realize some profits on the trades that I have open that are right now, and that would be the Google short, and I'm going to be watching Google for the next potential trade opportunity. So we have the swing high. This is the earnings candle high, keep in mind, guys. So every time we talk about like the high volume spots, and then we also want to talk a little bit about where traders would be underwater, where a particular side is underwater, and then obviously what happens is those guys get weeded out, and then the following, the stronger hand would be the side where you would want to be trading with, right? And that's just a basic concept of finding areas in the chart where if we're looking short, that would be the new target, right? 'Cause it's a very liquid range. It's an area where the campaign is is really building out to create some sort of, upside potential or then downside potential. So whenever you look at swing low, swing high on Google, this is your equilibrium to the golden pocket range. And if you go into the hourly chart, you're going to be able to notice how this is this is a previous support turned into a resistance, then got the breakout, and never got the retest. Okay, so that's very important in my opinion. Whenever I'm looking for structural strong trends, I look for gap fills, right? So my first initial target on Google is probably going to be this spot right over here, and that's going to be nearing that equilibrium area. So it would be beneath this low a day, right? And then this is two distributions that are kind of playing out where we saw the market kind of show off its hand into close. And I talked about this all week where I'm looking for Google to distribute in a resistance or on a lower high. Above the earnings candle high. I talked about how price discovery leads to then obviously new sellers coming in and potentially making an impact on this, seeing a little bit more of a sell side pressure. So this is kind of where it was all established from. You could see the strong seller asks over here where you have this gap, and then they continue to defend that gap with three bar series of lower highs off of that gap. Now, whenever we lead back into that gap, obviously this is an area where we would call traders caught underwater. This is that day. Where the market saw those end of month flows, the end of May, that's May 31st, and then that was a very positive move. And probably a little bit of a 0 DTE relation there when it comes to 0 DTE options and everything like that. So that whole support is dampened, but it puts a lot of bullish looking candles on the charts, right? So we laid off any sort of short side pressure over here. I think I don't even know if I opened a short whenever we did find those at the end of that week, at the end of May. And then we're starting to get the relief, and the relief is kind of drying up a little bit, ever so slightly on volume. Not anything too crazy, but we got to keep in mind of candle spreads. We got to keep in mind of high of days and then new highs and price discovery. Which we never got any price discovery. We never got a sweep of this high, which is a little bit alarming for me, but not necessarily, because what did we see on Google leading into the week? We saw a high that was sold off, and then it brought us into this stronger looking close with the base down here being really dried up low volume for what we would call the higher low. And then we got very similar structure over here. We got very similar structure over here. So it's just kind of a staircase higher with the highs being sold, the higher lows kind of diminishing on volume as we lead our way up back into where this bearish progression is being protected and where the strong seller ask is from. Now, whenever you're looking at the midst of this, the middle range of this whole entire said spot that we're looking for, what do we see? We see a lot of capitulation candles. We see a lot of gap downs and then breakaway capitulation after that slight gap down and break through a support, a support attempt off the earnings candle high. that turned into some sort of, really aggressive sell. That aggressive sell was kind of just back into this bullish progression gap that's being protected now as a support. This is also, if you take your fibs from the swing low to the swing high, that's directly off the golden pocket itself. I shorted Google over here last time, just looking for the distribution above the earnings candle high, which we did get, followed by the lower high, followed by the next following day, a gap down and a bleed and breakthrough of this internal resistance that led us into the golden pocket. We found the buyer of the golden pocket. Now we're getting the highs distributed once again, where the heavier volume is coming in off the tops. And then the follow through of the higher lows is diminishing on volume as we lead our way higher. It looks like a little staircase, and people might look at the structure and say it's bullish. I disagree. So we are now going to see what's kind of happening with Google. I have a little bit of leeway on my position itself because I was executing within this spot over here. I was executing the days prior, and then it never got the true follow through off this area. So I stopped out break even on those. I was shorting this little lower high over here, popped up a little bit green, and then it held the opening print or the orb low, and then it moved off the orb low and trickled its way higher. Now that's not a bullish looking structure. The volume is really low, with the higher volume candle being the one where a seller was a little bit more prominent at, and then that secondary higher high, or that's the third now, is also the one that's being sold, and then a base, and then we break, we retest that base. That's healthy sell side structure developing now. We fill the gap. They don't claim and hold the gap with a lower high. It just bases, it just breaks through this support, retest this gap, retest this level, retest this high into the close. Now, we talked about how this gap wasn't filled, and then we also kind of have this little support range down here that could potentially be retested. This is ideally what I would be looking for. Like I said, initial target's going to be right up here whenever we took the swing low, swing high. This is the golden pocket down at 172.66. This is also kind of leading us into the ranges where we have this high that was the breakout level that led us to the new high. And then we have these relative equal lows. We have this test down into here. We hold, we move our way higher, we find a lower high, and we find breakaway capitulation, followed by weaker buy side structure back up into that range, right? So it's kind of just rewashing the same exact trade over and over and over. And I keep doing it until it doesn't work. Just like Enphase Energy took a loss on that one last week. Could have mitigated that back to 7% red and then sold on Thursday, but then we got a rough day Friday, and then I sold for like a 30-something% loss, but it's all good. So that's that. I would love for this to hold and remain beneath the earnings candle low. If it doesn't want to, I would be looking for a lower high off of a spot like this, right? So that's kind of all I'm really looking for. It would be something that looks like, I'm sorry, that's the opening print up there. It would be something that looks like this, guys. And then potentially lower, but now this, where I'd be looking over here, is a little bit of a stretch. So we'll see how that position plays out. I kind of do like the trade. We're failing this little short-term like trend line looking thing. So we'll see what goes on over here with Google, but that's just my first focus of the week. Now let's go over into Ford. So we talk a lot about a particular side being underwater and trapped, right? And I think this set a lot of people off sides over here, right? And all this was really doing, guys, was kind of just pushing lower because it was a very established support that kept diminishing in terms of a level of a bid over there. So whenever we get the support breakdown and then we find a really compressed spread on this candle and then we rip our way higher, retest and hold with a bid now defending the previous support and doing it once again, keep in mind, where is this all being protected from? It's being protected essentially from this gap over here. Okay, so if we were able, we could pull out our moving averages right now if you want to. I don't know if you guys like to do that, but Whenever we look at this and we say, okay, the moving averages are compressing, we got a little daily trend line break out of this little wedge looking pattern. If you go to the weekly, what does it look like? Just a reversal looking candle on exhausted volume, followed by kind of just digestion sitting back on the support. What I'd be looking for is, and I actually have a small position over here, but it's not anything too serious, just like a break, base, and go. Maybe retest these highs, this high. Something just looking for a lower, a pop, a higher low, maybe roll into the higher low, and then I'm looking for a target up near 1260. I'm looking for the 12.5 call to go in the money. Cheaper premium there. Don't need to size anything crazy because if we do catch a nice move on the underlying over there, it's going to be a really nice trade. So that's that one. That is Ford. Now I want to go over into a couple other ones. We also have industrial on watch. That industrial on watch is a little bit sketchy though. It's BA. So BA is another, like I said, little trend break. I'm not a big trend break kind of guy, but it's all context of where we are at on, like on the chart itself, on the daily chart, on the weekly chart. Let's take a look at the weekly chart. So the weekly chart, I think this is an area down here where a lot of traders were caught off sides, where they pop, they short it, they double bottom, and then they look for like some sort of lower high, and then it breaks, and then it squeezes its way higher back in, not squeeze, but it moves its way higher back into these spots. And where is this all being protected from? It's from over here. Okay, so that's the little gap that was lost, retested, held. Obviously, there was a strong capitulation breakdown candle over there, and then we start getting a really high volume weekly candle over here. Now, whenever we're looking at what's happening in this chart, we could see how volume kind of increased relative to 2020, like 2 of November. And it's been increasing, and it's been increasing in this range where it looks like there's little to no effort from any sort of seller that's going to be coming in for the time being up until probably about 198 to 196, in my opinion. What do we also have on the table over here, guys? Well, this was a potential lower high. It was decent volume. This was a diminishing volume move higher, right? So patterns are telling us it's a little bit bearish. And then what happens is they put in a lower high, they fill the lower high, exhaustive volume down here, really no true seller after this really sketch looking candle. And then they get it back above the earnings candle high as well as the swing low. Caught some traders offside over here. Sellers were not present at all. And then we get the rip higher back through sell side imbalance on increasing volume. Now, what are we doing now? We're simply looking for potentially what would be a inside bar, breakdown, base, higher low, move to the gap. This could take a little bit of time to play out. We do also have a really low volume inside bar in the daily, like I said, and that's typically a bullish setup. Now, if this gets hit with news, that sucks. But like, I'm not gonna let that scare me away from a chart that looks good that I can take advantage of. And this has got hit with news how many times this year? So how much more can there really be in terms of not necessarily so much worried about the news, but just the level of inventory from the sell side that's going to imbalance the buy side. So the tape is going to be very important over here. I'm going to keep it on watch just because it's a decent looking chart and there's not a lot in the market right now for us to take really nice advantage of. Um, so we will see how this one plays out. But yeah, that's BA. I would also want to go over Tesla just a little bit because the chart's compressed, and we have a catalyst this week with I forget exactly what it is. Elon's doing something, but I'll look into that. Don't really care about it right now. Let's just talk about the chart. This is some record high volume aside from any sort of earnings. This is a news candle. And I've talked about how the sentiment was really bearish over here for a very long time, and typically when sentiment is very bearish, there's a lot of leverage to one side that starts to become essentially uninformed or overzealous, and then they get squeezed out of the name or they bail on their side. They turn to the flip side, the buy side, and then they repurchase what they sold over here on corrective spots where structure makes sense, discounted entries, and then they build out another reaccumulation after a pop like this, and then digestion, reaccumulation, and go. Now, reaccumulation does take some time with this type of inventory on hand from buy side, as well as a lot of deleveraging from short side, which was this really crowded sentiment. So all of this resistance is kind of just being built off of this little gap over here that led us through this little daily bear flag breakdown. So there is a couple areas that we could execute on the chart. We do have an inside bar in the daily. If you go to the weekly, it's just really compressed. We did make 3 internal lower lows, and that's one thing that I do like to talk about in terms of like sell side progression. So if the chart is currently favoring buy side in terms of like volume, everything like that, I think what could happen is maybe news can sell this off. It could be into the golden pocket, which would be like down into this territory, and then it rips its way back higher. That bearish reaction is then accumulated. We reclaim a support, and then maybe like retest and go. If that doesn't happen, I'm just going to be looking for the follow through with like a really strong, nice tape, and then potentially like a false break through the resistance, but then like a really nice mitigated sell side pullback on low volume with no alarming volatility from sellers stepping in, no crazy uh, shift in the tape, and then I'd be looking for like maybe a break base and go, or like a break, false breakout, discounted entry for a higher low of like one of these days on the highs, or it's going to be, yeah, this is a little bit tricky in terms of execution, but EMAs are really coiled. We do have the 50 SMA just ever so slightly beneath us. So yeah, I'm just going to be looking at this one for a couple scenarios, but that's going to be on watch probably after that thing with Tesla that everyone's talking about. So that's that. Now we're going to go over into Snapchat. Snapchat's a nice one just because really nice volume. When you go to the weekly chart, it does look like an accumulation. I don't like the fact that this isn't retested down here. And that's one thing that's a little bit alarming to me, but you got to trade what you see. And what I see is a heavy volume move higher, two really nice strong weekly spreads that are covering a lot of this sell side imbalance, potentially reclaiming this breakdown level that was from the tops of this range on this earnings candle. And then I'd be looking for follow through off of this week's low or this daily low or this daily high. What it all is kind of just this area right over here in this area right down here. So we're working right now with about $1 or about 60 cents of a range. So what I'd be looking for with this volume increase would be um, something that looks like base go or kind of just a breakaway move. And what would I be targeting? You could always pull low to high and look for equilibrium of the flag channel looking thing, but it's not really needed. What I more or less do is de-risk the position and try and just trade the chart and be able to see if it's telling me anything, whether to stay in, whether to get out. This low down here before we're getting the break in the go is really compressed move, and there's no seller volume in here. It's also did retest the earnings candle high, which I do like to talk about that a lot. If you want to look at like a little trend line looking thing here, we're kind of at a really important daily close. So you don't have to be first to this, but you don't want to be super late and like scaling in up here above 16. So we'll see. I don't even know. It could gap up. Who knows? Now we're going to go over to Marvel. Marvel, AMD, INTC. I would like a little bit of a relief on this move. Now, I don't know how this is going to behave with the compression in AMD. The compression in AMD is pretty crazy to me. But whenever we're looking at this and we're breaking down this chart, and you go to the hourly, this is sell side imbalance over here. This candle capitulation right through all of these higher lows, right? So what I'm kind of looking for would be like a move above this high and then a failure, or a move into 72 and a failure. Um, we also do have this kind of being pinned beneath this resistance over here. So we will see. But what we're battling for is this big gap. Funny enough, guys, that is also... Yeah, so I'd be looking like a retest into here or above that high for a short. Bearish candle. Um, yeah, there's nothing we could really do about indices right now. But, oh, MU. MU's nice because this sold off really hard. The volume patterns aren't telling me that this is a sell-off yet, but we're getting a lower volume inside bar with a new higher high that failed, right? So what I mean by that is this is your last high, that's your new high, it fails, and then you get an inside bar. Now, I don't know, this one's a little tricky. This one's definitely weird, but I might be able to take this beneath 130. We're not even going to talk about that yet because it's more or less just a gauge, and if I see the tape get lit up, then like I'll really think about it. Can't lose sight of solar, guys, but it could take a little bit. It definitely could. Just given the compression in this chart and where it's at in the weekly perspective of this, and how compressed and tight this resistance range is on the $15 spot, it's like you don't need to be early to this because I'm sure there's some short interest behind it. I'm sure it could get explosive if we get above a resistance and then we retest, and sell side move retest wise looks like just simple mitigation. So we will see. But yeah, that's another one that I'm going to be watching probably just for summer. Not really like so much maybe this week, but just for summer. MMM is an industrial that I've been slamming the table on. That's off of 420-day support turning into a resistance. Now we're getting the breakthrough. Bullish volume patterns. We're gonna see what goes. We're gonna see what happens with this one. Execution wise, it's weird. It's really weird. So I could take this and just risk like 99.70 or $100, or this little gap over here, which is basically the $100 psych, or like 150. I would just buffer it to $100, but we're gonna see how this one moves. If it gets a nice little gap up and a retest into here, and then it goes, I will maybe take an entry with some time. Valero energy sector isn't one that's been like super nice, but I caught 2 wins on this one already. Really compressed daily chart now. How many inside bars is this now? 1, This is the outside bar, heavy volume, keep in mind, and then we're getting inside one, two, three, four, five inside bars. So the whole entire trading week we traded within last Friday's candle. Well, like 2 weeks ago's candle. So don't got to be early to this just because of the compression, just because of the lower low and the retest of the weekly level. We did fill the gap. So we don't necessarily need to look for this to move any way lower. Maybe I'd be looking for like a simple red to green, taking out all three of these daily lows and then moving. If not, it could just look like a break, retest, and then a go. So we'll see what happens over here, but that's the last chart on the focus list. And then we also have Disney. So Disney's a little bit weird, but what's it doing? It's filling bullish imbalances. And what's the heavier volume? It's this, and this is all off of COVID low. Whenever you look at low to high, Golden Pocket's down at 95, 96 bucks. It could come back down to retest this, and I'm going to be very patient with this one. I don't need to execute this one like anytime, like super soon. But I'm looking at this area at 99 bucks. I'm looking at the 100 psych, of course, a sweep of this low into a hold, but the better probability is just filling the gap or down into 618, which is also this massive gap, and the low of that is near that 618 as well. Okay, so I'm going to be paying very close attention to the daily and weekly prints, and then I could buy some time over here with this one. But we could wait for the clearer picture to paint itself, so we'll see. But that's a weekly scan. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask, but that's the names that I'm going to have on focus.